All right, everybody, welcome back to another workout. This one is focused on core and glutes, and you can really do this one with just your body weight. I had definitely had a few requests for that, so I wanted to make sure I could get something up for you. And core and glutes is pretty popular because especially if you find that you're sitting a lot, then it's really good to just get up and get moving and do a little bit for these two areas. So whenever I'm doing a workout, even a short one, I always want to do a little bit of a warm-up. So we're going to get started here by foam rolling the quads. If you don't have a foam roller at home, at least do a quad stretch so that we're still giving a little bit of love to the same muscles. But if you have a foam roller, go ahead and set up, on the floor. Just start to roll vertically, slowly. Slow is really key. You want to be able to have the body as relaxed as possible. So think about a great plank, right? Shoulders over elbows, nice stable core. And then the positioning and the stability that you have in your core means that you can relax your legs a little bit. And when you roll, if you find a spot that's a little bit more tender, you can do some little micro rolls, like 1 to 2 inches right on top of that spot. And if you can, if it's not too uncomfortable, you can even bend your knee a couple times or do what I call sort of the windshield wiper here. So a couple really important things with stretching and foam rolling. If you're not going to take the time to focus on your breathing while you're doing it, I almost say it's not worth doing it at all. So really important when we're doing this, it's parasympathetic in nature. We're trying to relax the body. We're trying to dial down tension and discomfort and sort of high sensation. So really make sure that you're focusing on your breathing. Breathe slowly and even just imagine the body relaxing as you're doing the foam rolling and stretching here. And that'll really help towards releasing tension and getting the body into a little bit more of a relaxed state. And then when we start our workout, we'll dial it back up again. So our ability to switch between the two is actually really important to preserve. So we've switched over here onto the other leg. And again, setting that nice strong pillar of stability. So shoulders, spine, and hips, nice and square. And you may find that there are different areas on the right side versus the left side. So even though we look symmetrical, often when we're foam rolling or stretching, we notice little differences from one side to the other. And that's actually another great reason for even doing foam rolling and stretching in the first place. If you then find an area that's a little tighter, a little stiffer, a little bit more tender, you can make a mental note just to spend a little bit more time on that spot. And or in the future, sort of come back to that spot and check and see how it's doing. The more you foam roll, the less discomfort you should have. And realistically, the less you need it. So if you're finding this really uncomfortable, it might be a great idea to just sort of commit a few weeks to working on the spots that give you the most discomfort. Over time, it's not going to hurt as much. And you're not going to feel like you need to do it as often in order to maintain the good quality movement that you're looking for. So this one that we're doing here is the tensor fascia lata, and it's the muscle that runs, it connects to the top of the IT band. So sometimes if you have knee or hip pain, working on the TFL can be really helpful because it puts tension into that IT band that runs down the outside edge of your leg. And there's really not a lot of we don't want to foam roll a tendon. There's muscles underneath that for sure. But if you've got some IT band issues, foam rolling the TFL is really where you're going to get the best result. So just sort of rolling right on the side of the hip, and you can even roll forward and back a little bit to see if you find that discomfort. Moving on now to foam roll the muscles in the upper back. I'm finding that I'm sitting at my desk a lot, so I'm trying to do lots of extra things to strengthen my postural muscles on the backside and stretch and open up the chest and the front of the shoulders. So for this one, we just want to keep the foam roller rolling through the mid back. We definitely don't want to go into the low back. There's a couple of reasons why that's contraindicated. One, just the sort of position and shape of the vertebrae in the low back, but also the majority of the tissue in the low back, in the lumbar spine area, is actually more fascial. So we get a better result if we foam roll the muscles that are found sort of higher up in the back. If you find a tight spot in there a little bit. One of the things I like to do is kind of twist side to side a little bit, so it sort of feels like pulling the skin and the muscles apart a little bit. So the different directions that we move when we're using a foam roller just help get the tissues moving more freely. And the other thing you can try is pulling your elbows together. So that's going to actually protract and spread the shoulder blades apart and then get a little deeper into those muscles between the shoulder blades. All right, so a little bit of foam rolling done. We're going to do a couple of stretches here. Again, if you're like me and you find that you're sitting a lot, we really want to open up the hips before we do core and glute work. When the hip flexor muscles are really tight, it sort of prevents us from getting into hip extension as effectively, and then it can cause some of the work to kind of dump into the hamstrings or maybe the low back a little bit. So setting up and stretching the hip flexors in the warm-up is just a really good way to make sure that the abdominals are actually going to be able to do the work that we want them to do. So Bi-Phasic stretching here, you saw a little bit of a forward and back rock for about 30 seconds, and then we look for an end range hold. The most important thing with these hip flexor stretches is to make sure that you're keeping your posture and your core set. So again, pillar of stability with the position of the pelvis, the spine, and the ribs. I really encourage you to tuck your tailbone under, and that's why I've got my back toe tucked under. So squeezing the glute on that back leg helps keep the pelvis tucked under. And then we've got a really nice long spine instead of arching into the low back. So I like to say that the sensation of a stretch is secondary to the positional mastery of the setup. So really focus on posture first. You're still going to get a great result, even if you don't feel a really, really deep, intense stretch. Next one then is the adductor rockbacks. So this one targets the adductor muscles, which is the inner thigh. There's a lot of muscles that all connect up into the hip in the same area, and there's also a lot of dense connective tissue that runs through this area, so really common that it gets kind of tight and stiff. And one of the things that I've found is better hip mobility helps with better posture and better core activation. So that's why I like to mobilize hips a little bit before a core workout. So with this one, what we're looking for is, again, that really nice steady position. So when you set up, you want to think about the hips being square, your spine being in a nice neutral position, gently bracing the abdominals so that the spine stays up instead of sort of sagging down towards the floor. And then when you step your, let's say on this side, your left leg out to the side, roll the outside edge of your foot right down onto the floor. You might even feel a bit of a stretch up the outside of the lower leg in the peroneal muscles. That can feel really good. And then if you don't really feel much of a stretch, instead of reaching wider, what I want you to do is take your pelvis and think about it like a steering wheel. So if you're stretching your left leg, imagine turning your pelvis down to the left, and that'll actually increase the stretch in the inner thigh muscle. Remember your breathing, and whatever range feels comfortable for you is what we want to look at. All right, so short little warm up in the bag. We're getting ready to get into our workout here. So we're gonna do 6 exercises, and each round I'm gonna make the exercises a little bit harder. So for the beginner level here, we're doing a plank from our knees. I encourage you to take your forearms to parallel. What that does is adds a little bit of external rotation in at the shoulders, which can be really great for posture. So keep the pelvis tilted slightly. Think about bringing your belt buckle towards your chin. That's going to help engage your abdominals. And then push the floor away with your elbows through your forearms so that your upper back is nice and flat. The shoulders are in a good stable position. Keep breathing all the way through the exercise, and then just draw your head back slightly so that your neck stays in line as well. Great job. There we go. So a little rest in between. The 6 exercises that I've picked are from all different categories of core training. Some of them include training the glutes, and I think that's sometimes sort of left out in good core training programs. So the second one here is a hip bridge. So take your feet hip to shoulder width apart. You may want to turn your toes open just a little bit, but keep your big toe, little toe, and heel pressed down firmly into the ground. and then push the floor away and drive your hips up. The focus of a hip bridge is always that the glutes are doing the work. So imagine eating your shorts or eating your pants and really squeezing your glutes nice and tight. Then think about a really long line from your shoulders through your hips and all the way out your kneecaps. So it's not about how high you can go, it's more about the quality of contraction in the glutes. So if you feel the work in your glutes, you're doing this perfectly right. Great job. All right. So like I said, there's going to be a couple of different variations in each of the 3 rounds here. For the third exercise, what we're going to work on now is our abdominal curl up. So we think of these as the first level that I'm going to give you here are the crunches. So again, keeping your feet on the ground, I want you to just think about stability giving us better range of motion. So if the feet are on the ground, the knees stay nice and stable, and the hips stay stable, what we're really just focusing on is the abdominal muscles up the front or your six-pack. As they squeeze and shorten, what you're doing is curling the body up. So support your head just gently with your hands. Try not to pull on your head. You want to really do this work from the core, from the center. Your head is just coming along for the ride. And if you think about holding an apple between your chin and your chest, that's about the distance that we want to maintain in order to take the stress off the neck. One more. Great job. All right. The next exercise that we've got here is, I'm using a foam roller. You can use anything. I would recommend not too heavy. You could use a book. You could use, a Tupperware container that's got some stuff in it. You can use even just your own hands if you just sort of clasp hands in front. What we want to do in this one is, again, think about that really strong, stable lower body. So tuck your back toe, squeeze your glutes, and drive the hips forward so that you've got a really nice bit of stretch across the front of that hip. And what you want to do is imagine that your whole body right up to your belly button is buried in concrete. The only thing that's going to rotate is your upper body. So your ribs are rotating around, but your hips are staying as still as possible. So that's why I say don't do anything that's too heavy for this exercise, because we're really focused on creating that stability and that sort of spiral squeeze from the inside of the body out. If you use something that's too heavy, you're focusing way more on the load that's beyond you, and then you're going to feel probably your shoulders elevating and your arms really grabbing hard. And what we want to do is just be able to focus on this from the middle. So switching over to the other side now, I like to have my head follow my body. If that makes you a little dizzy, you can always just keep your eyes straight ahead. But what we say is that where the eyes go, the spine goes. So as I'm turning and looking with my eyes, it's basically a signal to the body about the movement or the direction that we want to be going in. So if you can combine those two elements, that's really helpful, especially for athletes. If you're imagining having to look over your shoulder to catch a ball or something like that, we actually want to train the eyes to be part of these movements. So exhaling as you do that twist, keep your chest lifted, keep your head drawn back, and great job. We'll do some different side plank variations and some different twist variations in the next couple of rounds. So already moving on now to our fifth exercise. And we're going to work on just a supine cycle here. So it's sort of a regressed version of like a bicycle twist, in that we're moving the legs, but we're not actually twisting and adding the crunch yet. So this is a really good one. You could think of this almost like a dead bug. Our goal would be to keep the space under the low back very, very small. So I don't say push your back into the ground, because that's a different set of muscles that does that action. But instead, what we want to think about is ribs to hips, maintaining that slight belt buckle to chin tilt with the pelvis. And then when you breathe all the way down into your belly. Even imagine your inhale going all the way down into the base of the pelvis. And what that'll do is really help you stabilize through that position. Awesome work so far, everybody. We're going to do our 6th movement here, and it's always important to incorporate the back when we do core training. So we're going to start off here with some alternating Supermans. So stretch your feet out, point your toes, stretch your arms out, and we're going to lift the right arm and the left leg at the same time, and then switch to the other side. So don't worry about how high you're going. That's not the goal of this exercise. First, I want you to think about drawing your belly button away from the ground just a little bit. It's obviously still going to be resting on the floor, but if you think about bracing the abdominals and then reaching for length, that's going to help keep your back in a really nice long position. If we start worrying about how high we're going, it's common that we tend to arch our lower back. So instead for this one, think brace the core and reach for length. Awesome. Great job. Round 1 is done. If you want to do a couple of stretches with me, just pull back into a child's pose. It's a nice way of lengthening out the low back because we do allow for a little bit of lumbar flexion. So sitting butt to heels and then just relaxing your chest down towards the ground helps stretch out the low back a little bit. Great opportunity here as well just to take a couple deep breaths, stretch out the lungs. And then if you want to, you can walk your hands over to 10 o'clock. If your hands are starting at 12, walk your hands over to 10. And then you'll feel a little bit of a stretch down your right side. So you might feel it in the side of the shoulder, over the top of the ribs. You might even feel it down into your side and even down towards the side of the low back. Wherever you feel it is where you need it. So just breathe and make sure that the stretch is comfortable. So maybe at the most a 4 or a 5 out of 10 intensity. If you want to, we can do a little bit of a chest stretch as well. So just grabbing onto your hands behind your back. Keep your elbows bent until you see how it feels, and then maybe extend your arms long and away from your lower back. All right, time for round 2. So if you're a beginner participant, I encourage you just to go back and actually repeat round 1. Or if you were looking for more advanced options, you might just be starting right here from level 2. Or you can just take the progression and go all the way through all 3 rounds. So in this one, we're doing some plank knee raises. We're going from the kneeling plank into the full length plank. And what I like about this one is you're really learning how your quads connect the plank on the front line. So in order to lift your knees up off the ground, what you're actually doing is squeezing your quads. So we're still maintaining that great position in the shoulders, that neutral spine with the core engagement, but then we're feeling the difference that it makes to squeeze the quads and engage into that full length plank. Now as we move on to our hip bridge exercise, if you have a foam roller or a block, a yoga block is a great option. You can put it in between your knees. That allows us to engage the inner thigh muscles a little bit by squeezing the roller or the block as we do some hip bridges. So you can always just do one lift and hold at the top. So an isometric hold is a great way to start to strengthen the body. If you're adding in and doing the pulses, you're doing the reps, you just want to make sure that you're using your glutes and keeping your posture really neutral. So when you come back down, don't rest on the floor. Keep your core engaged. Keep the belt buckle towards the chin so that the abdominals are engaged. And then you're doing the whole length of the set with the muscles engaged instead of resting down at the bottom. Nice work. Hopefully you're still feeling that in the glutes. If you feel it in your low back ever, you can always stop and take a rest, or you can do a lower range of motion. So if you come halfway up and you can keep it in your glutes, that's also a great way to go. Round 3 here, we're gonna add on to our crunch a little bit. We're gonna do a crunch with a march. So again, really lightly supporting the head. Try not to pull on your head, just give your head some support. And as you come up, I want you to exhale and bring one knee up to 90 degrees. So we're now involving the lower abdominal muscles by bringing one leg up at a time. But the key here is, again, maintaining stability. There's a bit of a theme with me in it. It's always about setting posture and having really good stability before we add movement. So speed is not necessarily going to help us get better if we lose stability when we go fast. So here we're just focusing on that slow core connection as we do the crunch with the march. All right, now as we head into the fourth exercise, we're going to take on a side plank this time. So when you set it up, I want your knee, whether you do both knees or whether you extend your top leg, I want you to make sure that your hips are actually extended. So that means from the front of your legs, through your hips and through your torso, you're in one straight line. Our glutes are actually a muscle that's attached to the side fascial line in the body called the lateral line. And so when we train sideways, like with a side plank, we want to make sure that the glutes are actually involved with that movement. So squeezing the glutes to push the hips forward is going to make your side plank a lot stronger. Now with the elbow directly under your shoulder, push the floor away so that you feel that stability in the shoulder blade and the upper back. And then really commonly with side planks, draw your head back. So pull your chin towards the back of your neck so that we're keeping the spine in alignment as well. What we do to one side, we want to do to the other. So as you switch to the other side, when you set up, again, make sure the hips are in full extension. So straight line up the thighs, the hips and the torso. Set your elbow directly under your shoulder and then push down into the floor with the knee and the forearm to lift your body up to a straight line. So again, in side planks, sometimes you hear various cues like lift as high as you can. There's different reasons for different cues, but for me, when I do a side plank, what I want is to have my spine in a nice straight line. So I'm actually set up on a bit of a downward diagonal. If I lift my hips up too high, then I'm sort of creating a little bit of a C-shaped curve in the spine. And when I'm training my core, what I'm really trying to do is teach the muscles how to keep my spine in a neutral and safe position. So that's why I like to do side planks this way. Starting to feel like we need that little breather in between. That means we must be getting close to the end of the round. So we're just going to add on a little bit. This time doing an adductor curl up. So again, squeezing a foam roller, a yoga block, or even a pillow between your knees will help connect your adductors and your lower abdominals. Now, when you touch your toes down, make sure that you don't arch your back. So make sure your pelvis stays in that nice neutral alignment. So ribs to hips the whole time. And if you can slightly roll your tailbone up off the ground, that's great. If you can't, it's totally fine. You can leave your tailbone on the ground and just work on the knee lift portion of this exercise. But exhale as you bring the knees up. And that exhale helps tighten the abs, which over time might help you get your tailbone up off the ground. Little breather here. We're starting to feel it. We're heading into one more exercise here for round 2. Roll your shoulders out, a little bit of a neck stretch if you want, and then we're going to get into our flutter kicks. So this is definitely an exercise for the glutes. The stronger the glutes are, the safer and more protected our lower back is. So rest your head down on the back of your hands here. We want to take the tension out of the neck and the upper back, leaving the chest just resting down on the floor. But I also want you to point your toes and imagine stretching your legs as far away from your hips as you can. So really trying to connect all the muscles in the lower body as we do these little flutter kicks. Additionally, try to keep your knees straight. So the muscle actually lifting your legs is at your hip. It's actually your glutes. So if you can feel your knee and maybe even a little bit of your quad muscle coming up off the floor, that's awesome. But if you can't, just work on lower flutter kicks with the feet closer to the ground. A couple more stretches here, especially because there was some extra glute work in that last one. This one is a great 90-90 stretch for the abductor muscles, the muscles on the outside of the hips. So what you want to do again is keeping that really nice long spine, just gently hinge forward over your legs. If you find that you're really tight, turn your torso more towards your knee. So you're going to be coming down at a bit of a diagonal angle. If you're really flexible, you can drop your chest to the center of your shin, or maybe even over towards your foot. But keep that foot dorsiflexed, so pull your toes up towards your kneecap to keep your knees safe. And again, just sort of look for that maybe 5 out of 10 intensity in your stretch, and keep breathing throughout the stretch. All right, we got 1 round left to go. So showing some advanced options here, but always take the option that works the best for you, using round 1 or round 2 options if that's better. So with this elevated plank on the foam roller, what we're adding in is a challenge around instability. So even though it looks like everything is staying still, I'm actually working a fair bit around preventing the foam roller from rolling. And what's natural is as your core gets tired, you tend to want to shift your shoulders forward past your elbows or past your hands. But if I do that on the foam roller is going to spin and then I'm going to fall. So what this one forces me to do is stay stacked in that plank position. And what you really want to do is squeeze the quads, brace the core, and then just keep pushing the floor away. So nice little added challenge on that one for sure. Second exercise, we're going to move into a hip bridge march. So I chose this one just because the hip bridge section of the timer only has the 1 round. So what we're doing is alternating between the right leg and the left leg hold. If you want to, you could do hip bridges with the right leg, and then you could do hip bridges with the left leg. So that would be another progression, is just moving into the single leg hip bridges. But I actually really like this one because as you shift when you're at the top, when you shift between legs, it's really going to reveal if one side is tighter or weaker than the other, because you're trying to resist rotation. Whereas if when you switch your legs, you feel your hip drop or you feel your hip shift to one side, it kind of helps you realize maybe where some areas are that you could work on strengthening. So third exercise, we're going to work an oblique twist this time. So we're still working in our curl up or our flexion pattern, but we're going to add in a little bit of activity in the obliques. So my favorite cue when I'm doing this one is instead of thinking elbow to knee, I'm actually trying to reach armpit to knee. And the difference with that is by trying to move your torso, you're really engaging your obliques. Whereas if you let your elbow move, you can actually just move from your shoulder socket. So if we go armpit to knee, you should notice that you're getting a lot more oblique activation. You're feeling it a lot more because you're actually lifting and curling up off the ground side to side. Nice work. Hope you guys felt the difference on that one. Good stuff. So coming into another side plank variation on this one, we're going to add the top leg raise. So it doesn't look very much of a progression. I still have my bottom knee on the ground, as you can see, but there's a couple cues we're going to use to make this really maximize. So one thing is, again, hip extension. So squeeze your butt to drive your hips forward. That's really going to start to tax the glute on your bottom leg. And then when you lift your top leg, that's the only part of your body moving. So you want to resist any other movement. So resist your hips rolling forward or back, resist your hips dropping towards the floor, even resist any unwanted rotation in the torso. So the only thing you're doing is lifting that top leg, and you should really start to feel it in both of your glutes. When we spin over onto the other side, what's crazy is the leg that was just lifting up and down in the air is now the leg that's down on the ground having to hold you up. So if you're anything like me on this exercise, this second side is going to be way more challenging because you've already tired out that bottom leg. However, I want you to soldier through it. So hips up, squeeze your glutes to drive your hips forward, brace your core by drawing ribs to hips, and then get really tall from the tail all the way out through the crown of your head, drawing your chin back towards the back of your neck, and then pressing the ground away through that bottom forearm. As you do those leg lifts, try to keep your knees straight. So push as much length through your heel as you can. Keep that top foot dorsiflexed. And if you've got any strength left at all, push that straight leg heel back towards the wall behind you just a tiny bit. Whew. I can feel that, and I'm even just narrating the video the day after. Good job, you guys. That's a scorcher. So when I do that one in a workout, FYI, if I do multiple rounds of that one, the first round I start with my right side, the second round I start with my left side, just to kind of balance out how hard the second leg is working there. So hollow body hold leg drops here. On this one, you've got a couple options. I'm demoing this one with the body and the head down on the ground. So it's kind of evolving the dead bug exercise. We've got the straight leg drops, and we've even got that extension overhead. Whether you're holding onto something or just extending your arms, it's okay. If you want to turn this into a little bit more of a hollow body, you can pick your head and your shoulder blades up off the ground. So you're adding in a little bit more activation in those six-pack muscles, the rectus abdominis. But you want to make sure that you're keeping the work in your core. So if you start feeling your hip flexors or your quads take over, then pull your legs up towards the ceiling just a little bit more for that one so you can keep the work in the abs. If you guys have hung in with me this long, you're doing awesome. We've got one exercise left, and it's one of my favorites. It's one of the 5 foundational movements of core training. So we're going to take a look at our bird dog here. So put your hands directly under your shoulders, put your knees directly under your hips. And for this one, I'm choosing to keep my back foot relaxed because I want to focus on this one more from a balance and stability perspective. So you can either reach out and hold, take a little bit of time in that hold, or you can do what I'm doing here, which is alternating opposite arm and opposite leg. But what I want you to try to do is have your arm, your torso, your hips, and your leg all in a straight line. So when we try to reach the arm and the leg too high, what we feel is a little bit of an arch in the low back. So instead of thinking about height on this one, think about length. So reach for the opposite walls as far as you can, and that'll help you really stay connected through that neutral posture. So there you go. Great job. We did 6 exercises for 3 rounds. Depending on which options you were taking, you might have progressed the workout. You might have challenged yourself all the way through. But like I said, any workout starts with a little bit of a warm-up. Any workout finishes by initiating recovery. So I'm just doing a couple of stretches here. Encourage you to follow along and make it all the way through to the end. So with our low lunge with a twist, you can leave your back knee down on the ground if that's a better option for you. What you want to think about is your spine growing as long and tall away from the pelvis as you can. So only rotate around the length of your spine. And then if you have your back knee lifted, push away through that back foot. So think about being as long as you can from your heel all the way out through the crown of your head. From there, we'll come into a wide leg forward fold. And I encourage you to turn your toes in a little bit. So make sure you have nice grounded feet. Soften the knees slightly and then just hang forward in whatever position feels comfortable for you. If you have your hands on the ground, great. If you can't quite reach the ground, that's okay. But if you do have your hands on the ground, tip forward into the toes just a little bit. Feel how that gives you space to lift the tailbone up even a little higher towards the ceiling. Now, this is an option, so you can stay in just the forward fold if you want to. But if it's comfortable and if you feel balanced, walk your hands over towards one foot and then breathe into the length of your torso. So what we're doing in addition to sort of that hamstring and adductor stretch in the legs is we're adding some length into the side body. So if you breathe into your lower back, you help expand and stretch the space where the QL is a little bit. That can commonly get tight if you find yourself sitting a lot. From there, let's come down onto the ground. We'll do a supine hamstring stretch. So grab onto the back of your leg wherever it's comfortable for you. That might mean behind your thigh. It might mean at your calf. Some of you might be able to grab all the way up towards your foot. But once you've got about a 4 or a 5 out of 10 stretch, I want you to try to relax your shoulders down towards the floor and lengthen the back of your neck. From there, take that top leg and cross it over the knee. And if you can, we're going to thread the needle and reach through for the figure 4 stretch. So if you're doing this with your right leg the way I am, you should be feeling this on the outside of your right hip. So this is a great stretch to release the abductor muscles on the outside of the right hip, things like your glute med and your piriformis. And then we'll switch over to the other side. So extending the left leg up for the hamstring stretch. Now, if you're a pretty flexible person, you can advance this by extending your right leg on the ground. So that'll open up the hips a little bit more. And in terms of the position of your left foot, if you dorsiflex, if you pull your toes towards your face, you'll really increase the intensity of the stretch. So then at the same time, if you need to release the intensity, you can relax your foot. The idea is picking a position where you can breathe all the way through the stretch and try to relax your body. So moving into the figure 4 stretch on the left, just remember dorsiflex that left foot to keep your knees safe. And then you're drawing your legs towards your chest based on finding a stretch that's comfortable for you. Try to roll your tailbone down towards the floor to keep your low back nice and long. And then again, relax your face and relax your shoulders. So we'll do one more here. It's always good to strengthen the back, but then also good to release and stretch it out a little bit. So dropping both knees over to one side for the supine twist. You don't have to have your knees touching the ground, but it is helpful to have your feet down just because that helps you ground your stretch a little bit. And then if you find that you are looking for more, you can grab your top knee and pull it a little bit further until you get the amount of stretch that you want. Great opportunity here to breathe into the ribs and breathe into the waist and breathe into your back to help with that exhale, relaxing the body and relaxing the muscles a little bit. And then from the perspective of the full length of the spine, once you've found your twist, if it's comfortable, go ahead and turn your head in the opposite direction of your knees so you're actually unwinding the spine through its full length. Take a couple nice deep breaths in through the belly, through the waist here, and let that exhale help you sink towards the floor just a little bit more. So coming out of that, just draw the knees towards the chest, maybe give yourself a little bit of a side to side. And great job to all of you guys. Thank you so much for joining me for another workout today.